John Anderson, how you doing?
I'm great. How are you?
Good. We went to school together, right?
Yeah. Well, thank you for having me. Yeah, we went to Tosa West back in the early 70s.
Do you remember at Tosa West back then, before everybody went there, these three guys burned that school down, or they gutted the whole interior?
I remember that, yep. It pushed the entry date back like a year.
Right.
My brother was supposed to be one of the first people to go through that.
Yeah.
And he got pushed back a year.
And they were sending them to all these middle schools to accommodate them, but they caught those guys.
Right.
And I remember one teacher, he hated those guys, but they were like spilling gasoline all over the place. That was such a beautiful school, and to have that happen, it sucked.
That school was like state of the art when they built that.
Have you been in there since?
No, I haven't been in there in 20, 30 years.
I was there for a reunion, and it was unbelievable how well maintained that building was.
Yeah, that was a nice building. At the time, that was like one of the finest schools in the country.
That was.
Public schools, yeah. So we were pretty lucky to go there. We didn't realize it at the time. It was just like going to school.
Right.
You know?
So I remember you back then, back in the 70s, as a musician, and you're a drummer. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, yeah, I started out pretty young. My brother actually auditioned for a band, and they auditioned at our house for some reason. And I got kind of fixated watching that drummer, and I said, you know, that's really what I want to do, you know. So that was kind of my start. And then shortly thereafter, I saw the Young Rascals on the Ed Sullivan Show, and I remember that drummer, Dino Denali, came out twirling his sticks, and he was playing away, and he took that stick and he threw it in the air, and he caught it. And I thought, man, that is the coolest thing I ever saw. Yeah. I'm going to be a drummer. Yeah. So I got kind of obsessed with playing drums, you know, and that's kind of how it all started for me. And by the time I was, 14, 15 years old, I was playing in a pretty regular band. And by the time I hit 16, I was on television playing on a show called Alive and Kicking with a band called Taylor Paul, which was my second band, actually. And that band, I was only 16 years old. It wasn't even legal to be in bars, but we were playing bars every single weekend. BJ Grouch's and a place called the Pine, bars that are long gone. But yeah, I remember we'd be getting gigs, and we'd play for like $100, and I'd get like $20. And I thought, wow, that's...
After you hauled all the equipment in there, set it up, played, and then you got to take it all down and take it out.
I remember my bass player coming up to me, Don Harvey, and he goes, here, the guy gave us like $20 each, so it's like $100, you know, and I'm like, this is so cool. We're getting paid for this. I can't believe it. Half of my high school's here. I'm like a high school rock star, and I'm getting paid. This is so cool. And that kind of started it. $20 was not the least I've ever made playing a gig, I'll tell you that.
But that was a lot back then, wasn't it?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it was like my job. So a lot of people had paper outs. I was in a band, you know.
So how did you continue your career from that point? I mean, you're still playing, right?
Yeah, so I've been playing now. I think I'm celebrating my 50 years of continuous playing, which might make me the longest running rock drummer left. You know, I'm not saying I'm the best. I'm saying I've been playing probably longer than anybody, because I started really getting as a paid musician at 16, and I'm still a paid musician at 66. So that's a pretty long run, you know.
It is.
So I don't know. Maybe that's a testament of being easy to work with. I think that has a lot to do with the music industry.
I think part of it was also you had the biggest drum set I ever saw in my life.
Yeah, well,
you had
back then,
all these drums, and then I remember you had a barbecue grill right there. You're flipping hot dogs, making hamburgers. You know, you had a washing machine. You were washing your clothes.
That was about it too. It was just ginormous, you know. Nowadays you couldn't even find a stage to put a drum set like that on anymore. Nowadays everybody has to play these little tiny kits, and no matter how small of a drum set I bring in, my band today is still like, can't you get anything a little smaller? I'm at a point now where I almost got to play on a suitcase, you know. But back then, that was the deal. Everybody had double bass drums, 8 toms across the front, a gazillion cymbals. There were guys that were hauling in gongs. It was kind of stupid, really, but
I remember
such a visual thing, you know.
Yeah, I remember those gongs.
Yeah. You know, I always laugh about that, because never once in my musical career did I ever think to myself, geez, you know, I really need a gong right here to hit. You know, this part of the song really could use a big gong hit.
And they
never.
put it behind them, right? The
Yeah,
gong was
yeah.
right behind them.
It was almost like your own personal backdrop, you know?
right.
It's just a visual thing. You never hit them. And they cost a fortune. They weigh a ton. It was so stupid. But back then, you know, it was all about the visual thing, you know? People wanted to see this big Marshall stacks and big drum sets and guys with long hair and spandex, you know? That was half the battle,
Did you ever wear spandex?
I never did. I always wore like a gym short kind of thing, you know, like back in the day you'd always wear shorts, you know, take your shirt off, wear your shorts, you know, like a real athletic drummer. You weren't playing good unless you were, you know, covered in sweat, you know. It was all about the visual, you know.
And then how many sticks? I remember these guys had billions of sticks sitting next to them.
Oh yeah.
Too, right?
I used to buy them by the case, but back then a case of sticks was like $24, you know, $2 a stick. Now they're like $12, you know, they're really expensive. So we don't go through them as fast as we used to, you know. They're kind of costly. Don't throw them into the crowd anymore, that's for sure.
So now at this point in your musical career, like, well, back then, how many gigs would you say you had a month when you were playing routinely?
Well, in my heyday, when I was in a band called Future, we were playing 22 to 25 nights a month, every month, consistently for a good 5 years.
Oh, that's grueling.
Oh yeah, it's like we would literally play pretty much every single day, because the days you weren't playing, you still had to rehearse and learn new music. Sometimes we would let the club completely empty out 2 in the morning, and then people would be cleaning up. We'd go back on stage and rehearse till 4 in the morning, trying to learn new stuff or write your own material, you know, because you know, you had to, back then people wanted to hear original stuff, where nowadays if you play an original song, people are out the door. They don't want to hear nothing. They want to hear what they know. You can't even play like B-sides anymore. You got to play the hits.
Right.
But back then people kind of judged you on your original stuff, you know. But yeah, so I played a lot of years, you know, and a lot of gigs, that's for sure. I wish I could count how many gigs I've played, but.
What was the most memorable gig that you did?
Usually when you play with, usually the most memorable gigs are the ones where you're opening up for somebody else, you know, like I remember one time at the Electric Ballroom. Remember that place?
I do.
It's like 35th or 27th and State, Jeffrey Dahmer's neighborhood, you know. Yeah. And we opened up for a band called Poco, and they just put out that Legend album, which had a bunch of hits, Crazy Love on there, and I remember their drummer coming up to me and going, "Yeah, can you believe it? After all these years, we finally made it." And it really sticks in my head, because I thought to myself, this is making it? You're playing at the Electric Ballroom in Milwaukee. Yeah. This is making it?
Yeah.
Well, that album did pretty well for them, and that was their moment of fame, because they really only had they had a lot of albums, but that was their big one, you know. But
cool,
yeah,
cool.
that was kind of memorable. And you know, you play with bands like Open Up. I always made the joke, we open up for bands on their way up or on their way down. Yeah. Nothing in between. You know, either has-beens or bands that are going to be really good. Like we opened up for like the Romantics, you know, and I thought, man, this band is going to be big. They're really good, you know. And then 2 weeks later, we'd open up for Badfinger. And I think, what a bunch of has-beens. Yeah. You know, a bunch of losers. You know?
Yeah. No, you see today, there's guys like even older than us, like 70s and 80s. Look at the Rolling Stones, and they're still playing.
Yeah, well, you know, it's funny you come back to that, because when not too long ago, I talked to Paul Cotton, who was the lead singer, guitar player of Poco. And he's still playing, and I kind of talked to him about when I opened up for him back in the 70s. And he still tours, and he passed away now, but at that point he was still touring, and he would run his whole tour on fans that would let him crash at his house, crash at their house, because they had no money. Mm. They had no retirement, they had no 401k, so a lot of those guys, they don't play because they want to, they play because they have to, which made me realize that I'm probably around 40 years old that I better get a real job sooner or later, because I don't want to be one of those guys that is living off my girlfriend. It's kind of like that old joke. What do you call a musician without a girlfriend? Homeless?
Yeah.
And I didn't want to be one of those guys, because I look and I know a lot of those guys right now guys I looked up to in the Milwaukee music scene that were really good. And I thought, man, these guys are great. And they're kind of like that now. They're living in either off their girlfriends or they're living in poverty now. And they were top of the world, 20, 30 years ago.
Did you have a gig? We mentioned this before taping this, but you had a gig where something happened in a bar.
Oh, a fire?
Yeah.
Yeah, we were playing in the Raintree Lounge in Iowa, and never forget that. It was like a 5-nighter, and that you could do that in those days. A bar would hire you for 5 nights in a row, and it'd be packed every single night. And stuff like that never happens anymore unless it's Howard Johnson's or something. But yeah, so we're playing. We played probably 2 of the nights, and everybody in the band got. There were 2 guys to a room. It's got like 4 rooms, and we're watching the news, and news comes on. Hey, there's a 4-alarm fire going on at this Raintree Lounge here, and we didn't even think about it. Mark Werpel was in a bed next to me. He's playing in Blackfoot right now, and we're both watching. It's like, wow, check it out, man. There's a bar on fire. Not even thinking about it, Wow, that's terrible. Listen, the door like breaks down, and our light man, our road crew, our bar's on fire. Like, oh, this is our bar. And I look at Werpel, he looks at me and he goes, that's it, I quit. I'll never forget that. They're like, oh, great. Every man for themselves now, huh? So we go down there, and the fireman wouldn't let anybody in, and basically I lost everything. I own the PA, I own the lights, I own, all the drums and everything. So I lost a lot. Those guys, their stuff got burned, but it got salvaged because they were way in the, the back. Guitar line is way in the back, and the dance floor kind of shielded the fire. But my PA was out on the other side of the dance floor. That got burned up. And if you know acoustic drums, it's all about pushing air. So if I ever had to play those drums again, the whole bar would just stink like a fire. So I could never play those drums again. So
didn't the skins melt though?
Yeah, everything melted. The finish on the drums melted. So, but in those days nobody had any money, so you tried to salvage what you can, But it was all ruined. I ended up trading that drum set for a really crappy car, and I think that guy got the better end of the deal. But yeah, those were tough times,
So you were mentioning how the Milwaukee music scene has changed over the years.
Yeah, it's terrible right now. I feel, but back then in those days, the music scene was thriving, and I remember days where I'd say, okay, who am I going to go see tonight? I could go see the Rage, I could see Bad Boy, I could see Off Broadway, I could see Yipes, I could see all these great bands, and they were playing all on the same night. Like, you'd almost have to drive your car and try to hit them all, and a lot of these bands became great bands. Cheap Trick was like a local yokel band. I probably saw them 50 times in bars, and I never thought they were even the best bar band, but they were great writers and great players, but all those bands played all their own music. They wrote it all. Nowadays, everybody's playing 80s. Everybody's playing like exactly the same thing, and there's no difference hardly between any of them, and nobody writes any music anymore. And now the whole big thing is the music scene is turned into tribute bands. I can't even name a good band that doesn't have a tribute band after them, and to me, I think it's kind of sad,
That is.
You don't get to see the next Cheap Trick. You don't get to see the next Off Broadway. I remember there was a band out of Chicago, Dick Holiday and the Bamboo Gang. They were the greatest band ever, man. I just put their CD on. I'm like, these guys were so good. We don't see that anymore. Nobody writes any music anymore. I don't even know where you'd go to find good live original music.
Now look what's happening though with drummers. They have drum machines now, right?
It's awful.
Yeah, they're cutting you guys out of the picture. How do you think AI is affecting music now?
Well, that's just one more thing that you can use to cheat. There's so many musicians out there, bands out there now that are using, like you said, drum machines. They use harmonizers. They use auto-tune. AI is just part of that. It's all replacing talent.
Exactly.
Back in the day, I would remember going to see bands just because the guitar player was good. The band's not good, but the guitar player is great. I got to go see these guys, Nowadays, you don't even have to be good. You just got to learn how to turn stuff on.
You know, that's exactly, I had Marcel Guyton on the podcast, and that's exactly what I told him. I said, you know, there's no talent anymore. It's
Right.
all manufactured. You could even change your voice, right? If you're
Right.
sing on a pitch.
Oh, absolutely.
See, that's cheating as far as I'm concerned too.
Yeah, I can almost see the harmonizers a little bit if you're like a solo act and you just want to entertain people in the back of a bar and you want to put a little harmonizer and make it sound a little fuller. But it's getting to the point where these guys are playing like karaoke machines, you know? It's awful.
Yeah.
And people are loving it. Oh, isn't he great? I'm like, he's not even playing and the music is still going. You know?
Yeah, that just seems so artificial. I guess that's why they call it artificial intelligence, maybe.
Right.
But yeah, I don't care for that. I used to, back in the 70s, like you, see these bands, you know, that actually had talent.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and I think the talent was much better back then. The best story I think I ever heard, best line I ever heard was one guy said, you know, back then we were all musicians that fooled around with drugs. Now they're all drug addicts that fool around with music.
Right, exactly.
And that's kind of the way it is.
Right.
You know?
It is.
'Cause a lot of those guys back then, they were schooled, they knew what they were playing, their whole life was dedicated to the art. They wanted to be musicians till the day they die. Now they're
like
just kind of like,
they're like naturals back then.
yeah, it was a much cooler vibe, you know. Now it's like a lot of these guys they're just awful, you know, and the guys that are really good have learned that they can make a lot more money as a soloist. So then they start bringing all that stuff in because that's their career, you know. I can make like $300-400 a night doing a solo show, or I can play in a band and hopefully make $100, you know.
Right.
So it's easier for them just to do their solo act and bring in all these toys and get through a night.
And it's expensive with all those toys, right?
Yeah, it's expensive, and you got to kind of know how to program it. You know, these guys aren't really musicians anymore. They're like programmers, you know.
Right.
So
besides music, in today, you said that you're doing a lot of rehabbing, right?
yeah, I've been flipping houses now since 1993, and that all started when I had a realtor girlfriend who kind of said, you know, you're a handy guy. You know, you could make some money if you bought a house, fixed it up, and sell it. I'm like, you can do that? Well, that was 400 houses ago, you know? And it's kind of interesting how that all goes, but it's something I really enjoy, and I feel like I'm giving back to the music industry because most of the guys that have worked for me over the years have all been musicians. It kind of supplements their income, and working for me is kind of nice because I let them take off for gigs. One of my guys, Junior Gama, is a great drummer. He plays in like 4 different bands. I think he's off of work more than he's on. He's always leaving to go play his gigs. I'm like, you know how lucky you are? No other employer would ever let you take this much time off to go to your gigs, you know?
Exactly.
So I've had quite a few of the Milwaukee musicians come through my company, and they usually work out. They appreciate the work, you know, and then they appreciate the flexibility. You know?
Do you have a name for your company?
Yeah, it's the Custom Look. You've never heard of us because I've been doing this 30 years. I've never even been in the phone book. Just all word of mouth. I kind of under the radar. I've been doing this forever.
That's the best way to get business.
Yeah,
Word of mouth.
nobody's. I've never advertised. Like I said, I've never even been in the phone book. I don't even know if people still use phone books, but.
Remember the old pay phones?
Oh yeah, those were the good old days.
You know, those were probably the best, right? As far as security for you when you were talking on the phone, nobody could tap into you,
Right.
Right? You didn't have all this garbage that's going on now with your cell phone. Do you notice, like with your cell phone, if you're talking about something, right? Next, you see ads for exactly what you were talking about.
Yeah, I noticed that one time when I was in my house, we had one of those Alexa things, and I said to my gal, I said, you know, I've owned every drum set there is known to man. I've owned them all. The only drum set I've never owned is a sonar. I should buy a sonar kit just so I can say I've owned every drum set there is.
Right.
Well, next thing I know, I go on Facebook, I see all these ads for Sonar drums. I'm like, how is this even possible?
That's scary.
Sonar is not like a big, ginormous company. I mean, they're big, but not something you'd see on Facebook every day.
You know, and you could have your phone off, and it still knows for some reason how you're doing. Right? Like now, if I'm driving down the street and I got my cell phone in my car, it tells me that, oh, you left your ear pods there. somewhere at this location. And I think that's really weird. But they're still recording, I believe, when your phone's off. If it's working like that, if it's telling you left a phone there, then it's working when it's off.
Yeah, and it's probably going to get worse before it gets better.
I think so.
I think they're figuring this all out, especially with some of these Chinese companies. They're really kind of digging for information. If you order from Temu or any of these places, I probably shouldn't even be saying stuff like that. But.
No, but they have a lot of these places have reward cards, and they'll give you like a cup of coffee if you come in 10 times. But they're recording all your purchases.
Absolutely.
Everything.
Yeah.
And I know one of them, I'm not going to mention, they send you at the end of the year an email that tells you how many times you've been in the store. And I thought that was really creepy. So now when they ask, when I go to that store, I said, you got a rewards card? I go, no. And I give them the cash. I go, this is my reward card. Okay, that's it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's getting kind of spooky, actually. I mean, we were warned about this back in the 80s, but nobody ever thought it would come to it. Like I said, I think it'll get worse before it gets better, But yeah, the old payphone thing, that's where the old term came from, the drop a dime.
Right.
Because it's how much it costs to make a phone call, and when you're ratting somebody out, you could do it anonymously from a payphone. No one would ever know who made that call. He dropped a dime on me.
And then when it went up to a quarter, everybody was complaining. Remember that?
I don't even know if there's even a payphone out there anymore.
I don't think there
is.
is.
If there is, how much is it?
Yeah.
Was it 50 cents now to make a call?
I haven't seen one in the longest time. But they were fun. But then you'd be kind of weird because you'd get on a payphone and you had somebody else's mouth on it. Did that ever bother you? And in their ear, and it's like, no.
Yeah, I don't know. That's kind of weird. I don't even know if there's any of those in around anymore. There probably are.
Somewhere.
It's probably are, but I don't know where. I haven't seen one in forever,
Yeah, so, I mean, cell phones, they're a great invention, but yeah, too much information.
Absolutely.
All right, so you got the rehabbing, you got the drumming. What do you do for just having fun on your own? Anything? Do you have time for that?
Yeah, but I'm kind of a one-trick pony. My fun is usually going out and seeing other bands. Yeah. To this day, I'm still kind of a barfly. I consider myself almost like a Milwaukee historian of all the bands that have come through here because I have a very good memory, and I can remember pretty much any band that was any good. And you're always striving to find that one band that's like, wow, no, these guys are good. Yeah. That was cool, But nowadays, 99% of the bands I see, I'm like, yeah, they're okay. They're all right. I mean, I don't care if you play a Journey song perfect. So what? Everybody else does it too, It's very rare I find bands like, no, these guys are cool,
Well, they have a lot of open jams today. I think that's how a lot.
Right.
And I always look at it like and analogize it to a bowling league, right? You go with your buddies, and that's what jamming really is.
Yeah, I've been to a bunch of those open jams, and I find myself noticing that it's always the same people. Right. These guys, like they're on the open jam circuit. Right. They know like 6 good songs or 4 good songs, and they go to all the open jams and just keep playing them whenever you want. I'm like, do you guys know anything else? How come you guys are never in bands? But I suppose if I was looking for a band, or maybe that would be the place to hook up,
Exactly.
Meet other people, or if I was new in town, kind of like, okay, well, this guy's pretty good, or that guy's okay, That's how you meet people, break in.
Well, John, it was a pleasure having you here. We go back a long way.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah, and I think everything that you said was very interesting, and I want to thank you for being here.
Well, thanks for having me.
Yeah. All right, take care, John.
All right, thank you.